Mike Macdonald had a problem. Well, really, the Ravens' defensive staff had a problem. As he tells it, back when he was a defensive assistant with the Ravens in 2018, they were trying to simplify their bloated defensive play sheet. The Ravens have a rich history of excellent defense, but this meant that they just kept adding concepts until the weight of their playbook was slowing them down. It was complicated for the players to run and unwieldy for the coaches to adjust. This unique problem prompted the Ravens to completely reinvent how they would teach and play their defense, and that innovation is now taking the league by storm. Mike Macdonald really embraced this change, went back to college to develop it, and brought it back to the NFL. There are now 5 teams across the league that run a Mike Macdonald system, and I would expect that number to continue to grow. Because this system works. In 2024, 4 of the top 12 defenses by points allowed were from this new wave of Ravens coaches. The Chargers, Dolphins, Ravens, and Seahawks all ranked in the top 12. Despite the Chargers and Ravens having secondary issues, the Dolphins being decimated by injuries, and the Seahawks shuffling their entire linebacker core. Just looking at these rosters, these were probably not top 12 defenses, but this scheme did a ton of heavy lifting. So what did they do? How did the Ravens rework their system to dominate the NFL? Well, they changed how they make a play call. A traditional defensive call is simple, or at least as simple as anything in the NFL gets. If we look at this play from the Seahawks 2013 playbook, we can see this zone pressure. This is left-right crash 3 palms. You have a corner blitz to create a 5-man pressure with a 3-3 fire zone behind it. It's a good play. But the issue that you have as a defensive coordinator is you have to be very selective about your play calls. This playbook only had 25 different zone pressures, which does sound like a lot, but it really isn't. Teams are constantly steadying what you're doing, and experienced quarterbacks are going to be able to start to recognize these pressures based on their film study. You would love to have more calls to make things more complicated for the offense, but when you look at the 15 to 20 different checks that each of these pressures has to different alignments and different motions, you start to see the load that is placed on your defenders. The defense always has to react and adapt to what the offense is doing, and that means you'll constantly be struggling to add more concepts without overloading your players. And that right there is the problem this Ravens staff solved. According to Mike Macdonald in a coaching clinic that he did, the Ravens built their defensive calls in a completely different way in order to expand their playbook. Instead of teaching plays, the new Ravens system teaches components. They start by teaching the fronts that they are going to use. These are the ways that they will align their players. Next, they teach the pressures, and lastly, you have the coverages on the back end. The Seahawks playbook, like most traditional defensive playbooks, have specific plays with the formations, pressures, and coverages all linked together. Again, go back to left-right crash 3 palms that we looked at earlier. You have the blitz, the coverage, everything is all paired together to create one play. And if you want to change anything about that play, well, you just need to create a completely new play. But in Mike Macdonald's playbook, the formations, pressures, and coverages are not tied together. He can call the same pressure from any formation with any coverage behind it. That probably still doesn't make much sense, but let's see it in action. I have a few simulated pressures for you that look very different to the offense, but are still technically called the same pressure name. This is what Mike Macdonald calls nail. It is a blitz from the nickel on the field side with the edge rusher from the other side dropping into coverage. We can clearly see this against the Lions. From a traditional 4-2-5 alignment, instead of just rushing their 4 down linemen, the Seahawks blitz Devin Witherspoon from the top of the screen and drop Travis Gibson into coverage. This is called a simulated pressure. You're still rushing 4 defenders and having 7 back in coverage, but it presents like a blitz to the quarterback as they see this nickel adding on to the rush. Behind this pressure, the Seahawks are running a pretty standard match cover 3. Again, the pressure here is called nail. Now let's watch the Seahawks run nail again, this time against the Dolphins. And again, this is the same pressure, but they're running it from a different front with a different coverage behind it. This is on 3rd and 16, and the front threatens an all-out blitz. but the actual design of this pressure is the same as the previous play. The nickel, this time Rayshon Jenkins, is blitzing, and the edge on the opposite side is dropping back into coverage. They're again rushing with 4 and covering with 7, but the wildly different presentation makes this look like a completely different concept. For the Seahawks, this is the same blitz. They're making the exact same pressure call. It's just dressed up with a different front and a different coverage on the back end. I have one more for us to look at. This time, the Baltimore Ravens are running the same concept. One player blitzes and another down lineman drops into coverage. Now, this time the blitzer comes from inside of the edge rusher. I'm not sure if this is an adjustment to the concept or if they have a completely different word for it. That's really kind of the point of this scheme. You really have no idea how they got to what they're running. But again, they're running nail and it does a great job of creating the pressure. I want to be clear, every defense uses consistent terminology to refer to their fronts, pressures, and coverage. A shared language makes learning plays easier. But that's not what Mike Macdonald is doing. Traditional systems teach terms to help players learn and understand the plays. The vocabulary is a way to facilitate the teaching of the plays. But for Mike Macdonald, he doesn't teach plays. He teaches concepts, and then he teaches how to build those concepts into plays. That is the difference. And that difference solves the complexity problem. If Mike Macdonald had just 4 fronts, 4 pressures, and 4 coverages, which to be clear, I'm sure he has way more than that in the playbook, but even if he just had that, that would be 64 different zone pressures. And remember, one of the best defenses of all time in the 2013 Seahawks had just 25 in the playbook that we looked at. When Mike Macdonald talks about making it simple for his guys and complicated for opposing offenses, this is what he means. But there's even more benefits about the way that these coaches have built and taught this scheme. Because of their deep playbook, it gives the defensive play caller a lot of different wrinkles that they can use in their game plan. It's almost an unfair advantage for these play callers in the system because there's so many different buttons that they can press. They just have way more flexibility to counter what offenses are attacking them with. In an interview after the Seahawks played the Chicago Bears, edge rusher Uchenna Nwosu said, "We literally installed some on the field." He's talking about installing plays on the field. In a traditional defensive system, that would seem ridiculous, but in a Mike Macdonald system, where players are taught individual components and the rules for how to put them together, it is somewhat reasonable that he could ask them to run something that they've practiced all week, but maybe from a different front or with a slightly different coverage on the back end. That is what this system allows defensive play callers to do. So to summarize, the Mike Macdonald defensive revolution simplifies learning the playbook. It gives your defensive coordinator a plethora of different options and adjustments that he can use, and it allows you to constantly confuse offenses with your endless stream of different looks. But there's one more piece that this system adds that really makes everything come together. These coaches teach every player, every position in their pressures. Let's watch this play from the Chargers that really shows this. The Chargers have 5 guys lined up on the line of scrimmage, which is fairly common, but let's look at their interesting personnel. They have their excellent edge rushers on the outside, but on the interior they have a defensive tackle, another edge rusher in a stand-up role, and a linebacker. That gives defensive coordinator Jesse Minter extra speed on the inside for this pirate stunt. Usually this would be a nose tackle, but by replacing them with an edge player, Tui Pelotu is able to flush the quarterback and force him out of bounds. Again, just like everything else in this scheme, it makes things more confusing for the offense and gives the defensive coordinator even more flexibility. We've established that this scheme is effective, but how do you teach it? Compared to traditional defenses that all of these players have been running, this is a big change. Building these novel yet essential concepts for the scheme, such as how to pair a front with a certain pressure, is something that these coaches need to start working on immediately when they arrive in the building. Mike Macdonald calls this drill pressure stations. This is a foundational drill for the system, and Mike Macdonald likes to do it in the spring to start building these skills long before the season starts. In this drill, groups of players will be tasked with running one pressure from a variety of different fronts. Each station would have one coach and only one pressure to work through, but they would intricately go through how to line up and who is coming. The goal is to get quick reps in a ton of different pairings of these concepts. Players can't be thinking on the football field, and they need to know exactly what is happening at any given moment. This is the building blocks for how to make that happen. Once these players begin to master the drill, then the coaches take it to the next level. They first start by calling any pressure from any formation. This makes the drill a little bit more realistic and forces the players to be ready for anything. Once they start mastering that, then the coaches start changing everyone's positions and things get really complicated really quickly. This entire pressure station drill is built to get quick and cheap reps. This system needs to be heavily front-loaded so that all of the players are comfortable with how these plays are built as fast as possible. Communication is essential for every defense, but particularly with one that is as modular as this one, it becomes even more paramount. The NFL is a league of evolution. Nothing is ever really new, but it's just an iteration on something else. And this Mike Macdonald system is no different. Macdonald himself has often credited Jim Johnson with a lot of the blitz designs that he uses, and of course he built off of a long pedigree of blitzing Ravens defenses. But the true defensive revolution is more than just a new scheme. It's a new way to teach defensive football. And that is why Mike Macdonald disciples are starting to take over the NFL. Throughout NFL history, there's of course constant evolution as defenses have to adjust to how offenses are attacking them. But more than just the new hot defensive schemes like the Fangio system a few years back or the Seattle Cover 3 system, this one will adapt and change. It's not just a new way to run your coverages, it's a new way to teach football. Schemes come and go, but this is more than just a scheme. This is a new methodology, and that is going to stick around. Thank you so much for watching. If you want even more Legion of 12 content, go check out the Patreon. I want to provide the best Seahawks draft content available, so we have tons of scouting reports on the top players, a horizontal big board that I will continue to add to, and weekly prospect profiles where I take a deep dive into the tape of viewer-suggested players. If you're interested in any of that, it's just $5 a month to get everything. Thanks for watching, and go Hawks.